Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, and share buttons. Well, this is a bad sign, and not for the obvious reasons that we're going to talk about, but I think because of the second and third order effects that this will have. I think this ties directly into Bible prophecy in that it shows the waning economic and military influence of the United States. And when we first talk about this, you may say, what are you talking about? But we will connect all of these dots toward the end. So what is the bad sign I'm talking about? Well, it's this right here. So again, this isn't breaking news. We all know that Trump was convicted of these 34 charges in New York City. But I want you to think for a moment about what this means. And most people would say, well, yes, obviously you don't want a politician to be singled out and charged with crimes they otherwise wouldn't be charged with based on political motivations. That is obviously a bad sign. No doubt about that. Clearly, if Donald Trump were not running for president, if he had never run for president, if he was still on TV doing The Apprentice, none of these charges would have been brought. And that is obviously a big problem. We don't want to see lawfare. We don't want to see the rule of law thwarted and political opponents imprisoned. That's bad enough, but this has other effects as well, as evidenced in some tweets we'll take a look at. So how about this one right here from Ed Dowd? He says, it shouldn't be hard for very wealthy people of both political persuasions to make a logical leap from Trump's rigged show trial to, hey, they're going to take my wealth next. The Rubicon has been crossed, and anyone with any sense knows it. So, obviously, there are people who celebrated what happened to Trump, and they thought, we're going to get him. But they don't realize that when they do that, that's really coming back on them. Because if you live in New York City, if you're one of these jurors, you really just harmed your city irreparably. Because I can tell you right now, for instance, me, any thoughts I had of being a tourist in New York, going to see the Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island, well, that's completely out the window, right? I'm not going to set foot in New York State, much less New York City. I'm sure I'm on a list somewhere. There's people that don't like the videos I put out or the tweets that I might have liked. And so why would I risk putting myself in a situation like this where the law could be used against me? So I'm just not going to go there. So certain amounts of tourism are going to dry up. But think if you're a wealthy individual living in New York City, even if you aren't very political, you're looking at this and saying, do I really want to take a chance, right, that I'm not the next one in the crosshairs? Why don't I just move to Florida or Texas, Tennessee, somewhere else? Somewhere where I'm pretty sure they're not going to do this to me. And then what implications does that have? Because much of the New York tax base is dependent on those ultra wealthy individuals. And as they leave, well, how do you fund all these city services? How do you fund the government? Everything starts, it's already collapsing anyway, but it then starts to collapse even more. How about this right here? We had this tweet go out from Geiger Capital that pointed out, here we have all these presidents that have thwarted the Constitution, trampled on it, set it on fire. Nothing happens to them, right? But, Trump, well, we're going to throw him in jail, right? And Elon Musk says, indeed, great damage was done today to the public's faith in the American legal system. If a former president can be criminally convicted over such a trivial matter, motivated by politics rather than justice, then anyone is at risk of a similar fate. And guys, that's what this all comes down to. It's the rule of law. And if the rule of law doesn't matter, then that changes the calculus with which people make certain decisions. And they're going to avoid these types of areas. And they're going to go places where they're more certain that the rule of law will be upheld. And we saw something similar to this several months ago. There's a real estate investor, Grant Cardone. He tweeted out, this was back in February, about, I guess, blue states versus red states. And people can take this as political if they want to, but it's just common sense when you stop and think about what's going on here. And he says the debate over sanctuary cities extends to why I can't buy real estate in blue states at this time. It says, one, difficult to evict bad actors. So they've put these policies in place that thwart, well, the rule of law. And we'll talk about that more in just a moment. Higher taxes, litigation risk, property owners demonized, sanctuary cities overrun, increased crime, no law enforcement. In fact, in several of these areas, they've said, let's defund the police. Let's, if you shoplift less than $800, well, that's not a crime, right? Just walk out of the store with it. Properties more expensive, rents in decline, or rents controlled, as in the case of New York City, and then, all of these different risks. And he says, as much as I would like to invest in these once great American cities, the risk is not worth the reward. Until the prices drop substantially, and they will, and political changes are made, investors will be punished. I pity anyone who invested in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, LA, or San Diego after COVID between 2020 and 2022. Many of those will be forced to surrender their properties back to the banks, and then those properties will become great investments again. And I disagree with that. Until those political changes are made, what person in their right mind would want to invest in these areas? And guys, that's the key point. It's not just these areas. Who would want to invest in the United States? Who's going to take the risk that are necessary in a free market society if the rule of law cannot be counted upon to be upheld? And we've seen this not just here. This shouldn't surprise us. We've been seeing this for a number of years on a number of fronts, with the Constitution being thwarted, just ignored. Think about during the pandemic, all these federal agencies that decided, well, I believe it was the CDC that started this, but other agencies jumped on board. You don't have to pay your rent anymore. There's a rent moratorium, there's a mortgage moratorium because of the pandemic. And so there was no legislation that was passed in Congress. Hundreds of years of contract law just thrown out the window. And if you were unfortunate enough to own a home or two that you were renting out and counting on that rental income for your retirement, and all of a sudden your renter decides, oh, there's a moratorium. And you go, well, but yeah, you got that stimulus check. You have the ability to pay me. Yeah, but I don't have to. So I'm going to spend this on other things. But you still have all the expenses. You were still counting on that income. All that just went out the window. Rule of law didn't matter. What about, well, student loan forbearance and then student loan forgiveness? And even when the Supreme Court says, no, you can't do that, the Biden administration still went forward and then bragged about still doing it anyway in defiance of the Supreme Court. How about the mandates and what they demanded that everyone do? Again, all of these things flew in the face of the rule of law. And to think that that has no impact whatsoever well, it's just, one political party against another or one ideology against another, and that it doesn't completely wreck the free market system, which is the basis for our standard of living, and it's the basis for United States military power and the ability of the United States to project military power across the globe. Well, if you think all of this has no bearing on that, you need to think again, because this has everything to do with that. One of the primary reasons why the United States became one of the wealthiest nations on earth was respect for the rule of law. And investors all around the world knew that the rule of law would be upheld and respected in the United States, that they wouldn't have to worry about these types of political courtroom lawfare events like we just saw with President Trump, that they would be treated fairly and within the rule of law. Now that has gone away, and it makes the United States less interesting for an investor. They look at that and go, now that's a strike against the United States. And it's not just United States citizens that are having to deal with this. We've seen this in the aftermath of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and all the sanctions that were implemented against Russia. And then we saw, well, we've frozen these Russian assets and we're going to turn them over to Ukraine to buy weapons to fight Russia. Ha 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 ha, aren't we smart? Again, a very similar thing on an international scale to what we saw here from Trump's political enemies. They think they're going after Trump. Really, they're undermining their own freedom and liberty in doing that. And we see the same thing here, where we had the United States saying, we're going to freeze these Russian assets and hurt Russia. In reality, it's hurting the United States. Let's take a look at this article right here from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Well, the U.S. is now allowed to seize Russian state assets. And at least that, they used Congress to do this instead of just having an agency or the president just decree it into being. But it says, how would that work? Well, let me tell you how it works. Here's how it worked. Russia confiscates 800 million euros from Deutsche Bank, Unicredit, and Commerzbank. And Russia to seize $440 million from JP Morgan. So this is how it works. We shoot ourselves in the foot. Oh, we're going to shoot Russia, but shot ourselves instead. That's how it works. And it undermines confidence all around the globe in the US dollar and the US Treasury market when other nations go, well, are they going to freeze our assets next? The same question Elon Musk was asking about, and Ed Dowd were asking about the Trump felony convictions. Well, why would I remain in New York City as a wealthy person? Am I next? And so the same thing is happening abroad when it comes to U.S. treasuries and dealing with foreign assets. Other nations would go, are they going to freeze our stuff next and use it against us? You know what? Maybe we'll sell those treasuries. Maybe we'll buy gold instead. Maybe we'll start trading in other currencies instead of the US dollar. And again, this turns around and it undermines the economic vitality of the United States. This makes the United States less dominant in the financial sphere as fewer and fewer countries use dollars, as fewer foreign investors want to invest in the United States because the protections of the rule of law that had been there for over 2 centuries have seemingly disappeared overnight, to where they go, well, if I fall on the wrong side of the political spectrum, they can freeze my assets, maybe even throw me in jail if I happen to be in the United States. So, we'll just avoid investing in the United States. We'll avoid using US dollars in trade. We'll avoid holding US debt, and instead we'll buy gold and hold that instead. And when they do that, it undermines the economic position of the United States, We're seeing waning influence economically in the United States. Again, the ability of the United States to project power across the globe militarily is dependent on the US dollar as the world's reserve currency, the ability of that dollar to be printed and exchanged for a barrel of oil. We're seeing these things go away, with the US Treasury being held as the world's reserve asset by central banks all around the world. So all of this ties together and undermines that position. Guys, we have long ago hit the high water mark for the United States in terms of its economic power and its military power. We're seeing that in the Red Sea as that plays out. And again, these things, they feed on each other. So as the ability to protect the world's waterways and open the world's oceans to free trade, as that goes away, as the United States can no longer do that, well, that undermines the US dollar and the US Treasury. So the United States, unfortunately, has peaked, and we are seeing the power and influence economically and militarily of the United States wane. Again, why does that matter? Well, because Bible prophecy, when we read about the events of the end times, the tribulation period, there is no mention whatsoever of the United States, certainly as a major player of any sort. So we would expect to see this happen. And for years, people would say, well, we can't be near those times because look at how powerful the United States is, and the Bible doesn't mention them. So something dramatic is going to have to happen. Well, we're seeing that unfold, guys. We're seeing a collapse of the United States in terms of its global power and ability to project that power financially and militarily. It's not completely gone right now, but we're seeing it erode away very quickly. And that tells me we're getting closer and closer to that time. I believe the final nail in the coffin for the United States militarily and economically will be the rapture of the church. It will take all of these different assaults on the economic and military power of the United States, all the different elements that are leading to that decline, and it will accelerate them instantaneously. So guys, this is a bad sign for more than the obvious reasons. Again, when you see a major presidential candidate targeted by his political enemies and convicted of crimes that he otherwise wouldn't be charged with if he were your average Joe and not a threat to them, that tells us we've really turned a corner politically, but it also says we've turned a corner economically as well, and then by definition, by default, militarily, because the military gets its power from that ability to fund it economically. So this is all leading to basically the destruction of the United States as we've known it. And guys, that's exactly what we would expect to see in the end times. So let me know what you think. Maybe you think, no, this has no bearing whatsoever. Yeah, no, doesn't matter at all, right? Or Trump deserved it. Whatever you think, leave your comments below. But guys, I think this is a very bad, ominous sign, not just for our politics, but for our society as a whole, the rule of law, and people's confidence to be able to live their lives in a free market society with freedom and liberty, which is the source of the prosperity that we've seen, along with God's hand on the United States, which has clearly been lifted. God's blessing is no longer on the United States for many reasons. But guys, what do you think? Leave your comments below. Make sure to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons. And God willing, I will see you next time. Bye. If you want to learn more about the end times and Bible prophecy, make sure to visit my Substack at brittgillette.substack.com. britt.com. There you'll find my latest videos and articles, as well as notes, where I share the latest news headlines, the articles I'm reading, and the videos I'm watching. Subscribe for free, and each new post on Substack will be sent directly to your email. Just scroll to the bottom of the homepage and hit the subscribe button. As an added bonus, your first welcome email will include a link to a copy of my free ebook, 7 Signs of the End Times. Also, make sure to check out all of my books. Just look up Britt Gillette on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Apple iBooks, Google Books, Kobo, or anywhere books are sold. Thanks for watching today, and until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith.